right, maybe we should start this going. All right, welcome to the second part of Git Happens. The original webinar happened on June 16th, and it was hosted by CIDM. The recording is online, and I will add that in the chat. Part 2 is hosted by Bluestream, so thank you for hosting us today. Rick is from Bluestream, and Frank is from Refine, and I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
Thank you very much, Kim. Quick introductions for anybody who doesn't know me. My name's Rick Page. I work for Bluestream. I look after EMEA mostly, but also spend some time in North America as well. I've worked with structured content since 2001 and with DITA since 2005 when it first came out. So 14, 15 years, a long time. And in that time, I've worked in many markets. So passing over for Frank to give a quick introduction and recap on what we talked about last time and what we're going to dive into today.
Okay, yeah, thanks Kim and thanks Rick. And thanks everybody for showing up. We put you through the test last week at this time. Said, do you really want to come and see this webinar? And we apologize. It really wasn't a test. It was a technical debacle. But thanks for hanging in there. And this is take 2 of Git Happens 2. Like Kim said, we started the conversation about a month ago, and really was just the tip of the iceberg. And we're going to get a little bit deeper into the iceberg today. But I don't even know if we'll get below the water with this iceberg because there's a lot to talk about, but we might as well try. What we want to do is get a little bit deeper into the topic. There were some good questions that came up in the previous webinar from the audience that that require a little more time to talk about and a little more technical detail to get into. So I guess I'm still on the introductions. I'm Frank Miller. I'm the president and principal at Refine. Like Rick, I've been doing this decade and a half, and most of my experience in this component content management space is around the DITA architecture and moving people into a structured content from unstructured, typically with DITA infrastructure, and so that's where my point of view is coming from. So let's do a quick recap of what we talked about last time, that tip of the iceberg conversation that we had. Really what we wanted to do was set some context around what do we need from our infrastructures, from our tooling, from our technical backbones when it comes to structured content in a modern world in 2020. So what are the requirements of modern tech docs that allow us to make the content and deliver the content that our customers want in this day and age? So we started with that, and then we delved into the options that people have today when it comes to component content, and we looked at the data, the data showing from the CIDM 2020 trends research or 2019 trends research. The data shows that the most common systems, the most common repositories for content are either CCMSs or version control systems like Git and SVN. And my guess on that is that most of the Git SVN bucket are Git these days. But you saw those being the predominant platforms, and we saw that the Git SVN bar was raising in the last couple of years. So we spot a trend there where we're trending up in that particular area. And I can tell you anecdotally from the work that we're doing that it is trending up. We're seeing more and more of that. So that's where we kind of entered into the conversation last time. And Rick and I kind of did a back and forth over, where are the strengths and weaknesses. And at the end of the day, it's interesting conversations, but we just need to remind everybody that it's all about requirements of what your business needs, requirements of what your content needs, requirements of what your writers need, as to what should drive the decision. So we kind of, ended with that. But we just scratched the surface. So here we are with Git Happens Part 2. So on the next slide here, very simple, a very simple agenda for today. We're going to talk, kind of more in depth about some of those topics that we scratched the surface on last time, and really what does a CCMS offer over Git, and what with Git can you apply to replace some of that content management functionality. That is if you're putting together a platform for developing and delivering content, Git is only a part of it. It's a repository. It's a versioning system. So how do you actually put together a content infrastructure using Git? You're missing out on some CMS functionality there. How do we make up for that with a Git infrastructure? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're also going to open the floor to questions, and I think if it's possible, I don't know if it is possible, Rick, we kind of want to turn on the microphone because there are some people out there in the audience that have some good experience and have some good things that they could share, and maybe we could turn on the mic and let some people talk. But Rick, I'll leave that up to you to see if that's even possible on this webinar platform. Okay, so with that, setting the stage for what we're about to talk about today, I'm going to turn it over to Rick because we're going to start with the CMS. And what do you really get in a CMS? What are you paying for that sets it at an advantage to this sort of do it yourself, put it together yourself infrastructure that Git allows you to do? And I'm going to turn that over to you now, Rick.
Thank you, Frank. And I'm not sure if we can do the microphone at the open mic at the end. I'd like to try it. We'll see what happens. And
all right,
with luck, it will work.
Okay.
With our current performance issues, I suspect it will fall over gloriously. But again, we do have some questions coming in. We will answer them. We'll answer them offline, share the information, do whatever we can to keep this whole conversation going forward. So
okay, yeah. Based on what happened last week, maybe we shouldn't press our luck. Then.
Yes,
that's what you're saying. Okay.
It is really. So this time last time I was as independent as I possibly can. Today I need to actually talk about functionality within a CCMS. And since I work for a CCMS vendor, it would be rather silly not to take advantage of this. But the functionality I talk about now in these current slides are really what you should expect from any modern component content management system. And really, I think the main difference here is the M. It's the management that you're going to get out of the box with one of these systems. So this is Xdocs, everyone knows Bluestream and Xdocs, and this is the administrator's screen that you get. And then you can see across the top, we've got control over workflow, branches, localization, project, security, extended metadata, etc. So what you're getting with a CCMS, and if I'm plugging this on behalf of the CCMS vendors, is this management out of the box. So we look at workflow control as an example. Now, this is a standard workflow that we ship with, but the system, and again, a CCMS should come with workflow capability. It's what you need in order to control or bring that extra level of control to the process. You don't need to use it on everything, but it's certainly useful. It will provide an audit trail of why things were done, why changes were made, who made those suggestions. Things like that can be really useful if you're working in a regulated environment. This is a simple workflow where we're asking an author here to actually create and or revise some content and then send it off to a subject matter expert to review. And it's important to think about the subject matter experts because in your Git environment, they're not necessarily fully au fait with the system that's being used. So here, our SME has the option of rejecting or accepting the changes. He can send comments back to the author, makes more changes, repeat the process. when he's happy, it goes on to another person. We're calling it an editor here, but it any role. The editor can again reject that back to the author or approve it, and it goes off for publishing. So it's this level of control and being able to bring workflows in from other systems, so you don't need to design the workflow within Xdocs or other CCMSs. You can design them outside and bring them in, as long as they're sort of open system compliant. So that's giving you control over the processes. And then also, I think we did touch on this, we went into this quite a bit of detail when we were speaking before. Localization is such a key thing now when we're trying to sell our products in other countries. Within the EMEA or with EU, we're talking 27 languages. Worldwide, obviously far more. So actually being able to have that control over the localization process is really, really important, or it isn't. There are loads of companies out there who aren't localized, and if you don't need to localize, then this is a completely moot point. But if you do, then the extra control and configuration that you can get with some of these systems is going to make your life a whole lot easier, because it will be picking up what content needs to go for localization. We set this up with a polling system. We use FTP, and that goes both ways. So when the system can check that content needs to go out to the LSP for a quotation or just for the job to be done, it can check to see whether the contents come back, and it will manage that entire process. And you can report on what is outstanding, so you know when you can publish your Spanish version or your Portuguese version or your French version, whatever language you're looking to do. You know when all the files are there, and you can do that publication. So it's a level of control over the localization process. And I think this is one area where you may wish to question whether you go with a non-CCMS approach. I think localization is a real key indicator. That is, of course, my view, and Frank will tell you exactly how to do it in a different way, which is the whole point of these conversations that we're having. Again, here we are, we're within a DITA environment, we're within a structured content environment, and so the control and usage of metadata is vitally important. And you can do an awful lot of control over your metadata if you're using Oxygen, but there's still things that you can't do that a CCMS is going to actually bring in and expose to you, so you can actually get more out of the content. You can make sure the content's being properly marked up. You can go off and we can harvest metadata terms and use that to improve the delivery options. So you can, the more control you have over your data, the more things you can do when it comes to delivery. So as you can see on this particular screen, we have lots of options that you can do when you're working with metadata within the system. And then we go back to the SMEs. And as I mentioned, if you're working with a CCMS, then there should be clear and easy tools for your subject matter experts to use when it comes for reviewing. Here we've got our Web Explorer, which is I wouldn't say dumbed down, but it's a very simplified interface. We tried to make an interface that just looks like a wiki. So if I'm a subject matter expert, I can get sent an email that tells me I've got something to review. I can click onto the system, opens up in a browser, no tags, everything hidden, but I can still go through and I can click in here and I can suggest changes. I can put comments in here. But because this is all part of the system and this is all being done in DITA using XML, Doug here has made a comment. If I log in and this is the view of an author working within Oxygen, these comments are being instantly recorded. It's all in DITA. The subject matter expert doesn't need to know what he's doing, but he's putting the comment directly to the author, and the author can then make the changes within the environment that the author is used to doing. So that's really quick points, but what we're really talking about from a CCMS vendor's perspective is a consistent environment. So everybody's going to be using the same set of tools and with similar interfaces, so people aren't having to make things up themselves and configure them themselves. It's all there. You don't need to be especially technical to use the system. Authors just want to author, subject matter experts just want to comment and get on with their proper day job. And you're also going to have out-of-the-box reporting with a CCMS and reporting capabilities will personally log every single interaction with the system. So it's possible to go back and pull out reports on almost anything that you wish to think about. And so you're creating a very good audit trail. And when I talk about robustness, a CCMS is a commercial product, a COTS product, technically a commercial off-the-shelf product. It's been designed to be used and abused. So it undergoes rigorous testing. It shouldn't fall over. You shouldn't get any errors because it's been designed for what you're using it for, and it's been tested to do what you're trying to do with it. And as such, you shouldn't need to be writing special scripts to make it your system do what it is you want to do. It should all really much be there. So it should be a much easier tool to use, but you will have to fit to the CCMS. I will accept that you will have to probably work the way the CCMS has been designed, which will take away some flexibility that you may want, and that becomes one of the trade-off arguments. So my pitch for the one side, the CCMS side, I'll pass over to Frank, who will talk about how you can address these issues, I'm sure, with using a Git environment.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Rick. And so I'll just set the stage here with, I'm not pitching this. I always do go back to, what are the requirements? What are you trying to do as an organization, as a business? And then let's make the right decision based on the business. So I do now believe that a Git infrastructure can be the right decision. Like I mentioned in the first part of this this conversation a month ago, most of my work, most of my company's work has been in the CCMS environments, helping people move over into DITA and moving over into Bluestream or other component content management systems that work really well with DITA. That's been sort of our bread and butter. But in the last few years, we've had more organizations that have wanted to and needed to be successful with the Git infrastructure, and we've seen some success there. So I'm speaking not from a point of having any strong opinions on one or the other. I'm also not speaking from a point of expertise by any means, but I am speaking from a point of experience, an experiential point of view of seeing how it works in small teams and medium teams and large teams now. So that sort of sets the stage for what I'm going to talk about here. So the title of this slide, how do we get the management part of the content management system if we're using a Git infrastructure? That's a tough nut to crack. There's a lot to that. And I'm going to touch on, I think, what are the key points. But before I get into that, just generally speaking, some what I would call tips or things to really, they're more than tips. They're things to really take seriously as if you're looking to go down this path. If you're looking to venture into this, either in terms of an experiment trialing it out, or if you really have committed to it. These are the things that you should consider before we get into details here. First of all, the tools matter. They really do matter when it comes to this infrastructure, especially. And you've got to pick the right tools all along the content lifecycle. With a CMS, like Rick just showed you, a lot of that's already it's picked out for you. You got to figure out how you got to work it. You got to pick your XML editor. You got to pick your delivery platform. But the CMS takes care of a lot of that, of a lot of those issues for you around your localization, prepackaging, your SME review cycle, your metadata management. All of those things are in the CMS. In this type of environment, you have to pick all of those things, and you got to pick them wisely. I'll give a shout out on number one, and give you guys somewhere to look to get started on that. Elliot Kimber's done some really good work on I'll call it the DITA for Small Teams project. He's got just Google it, or we can Slack it. Kim, if you could put Slack it, you could put this in the chat, the DITA for Small Teams link, and it's a good place to start because Elliot really thought through how could we do this without a CMS, and has some really good recommendations. That was back, I think 5-6 years ago, close to it. Now we're looking at DITA for medium teams and DITA for large and very large teams. And so how do we crack that nut? I think some of the same principles apply, but we do have to be really careful with getting the right tooling. So that's just number one, pick the tooling wisely. Number two, if you're going to be in DITA, make sure that you've got something that can do heavy lifting with DITA. And I said it on the last call, I'll say it again. I don't think there's any better DITA heavy lift than Oxygen, and that's for a lot of different reasons and a lot of different use cases. But you've got to prioritize that, because if you don't have in your CMS, you're not having something repository that manages all your components. How are you going to replace that? How are you going to get that? You need something that really is working well with DITA, and you've got to prioritize that. Number three and number four, these are just kind of warnings. Don't give short shrift to designing your repos and your branch strategies. Those are really important. Like Rick said, a lot of the things around release management are already going to be there in the CMS. You have to configure it a little bit, learn how to work with it. But it's basically your design is already there. In this case, you have a blank canvas, and that's great. It's got a lot of flexibility. It can also get you stuck, and it also get people tripping over one another and create a spaghetti nightmare for you. So overdo the thinking on your repos and your branches. Overdo also your content governance. We talk governance a lot when it comes to reusable content. Who owns what? Who owns the change? Who owns the? When does this get updated? It's doubly important, triply important when you're talking about separate repos and separate branches and all the things that you can have with Git and this sort of infrastructure. And it's what trips people up when it comes to doing reuse and things like that, and tracking dependencies and linking. So overdo that as well. And then the last thing I'll tell you here, and this is another thing you can kind of think about and go read up on a little bit, but I would say embrace the as code way of thinking. Content as code, if those of you unfamiliar with it, I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but I believe it's an effort by a group of like-minded people to adopt software engineering best practices to content. And that whole philosophy is sort of fitting in with the for small teams and sort of build your own platform approach. The content code philosophies, I don't agree with all the tactical things necessarily that they recommend, but I don't think they're not asking for me to agree. They're just laying out a philosophy for this, and
I think it's worth following and taking some ideas from if you're going to be in this sort of environment. So next slide here, Rick. I'm going to start with one of the content as code design principles, and I want that to frame everything I'm about to talk about. One of the design principles is around focused writing. Okay, so you see all of the design goals here that need to be thought through and need to be made real if you're going to build your own infrastructure. Okay, so the writing, localization and translation, collaboration, release management, content reuse, and multi-channel from a single source. Those are all things that have to be considered if you're going to build your own and use Git. And so the one that I want to focus on for what I think is the first place that, and the first place and the most important place for something like this is the focus writing. And that's on the next slide here, Rick. So the design thinking, and I cut it straight from the website that I linked to on the previous slide. Okay, focus writing, quote unquote, the ability for authors to focus on their content and not have to think about the technology is a design goal, and that seems pretty obvious. That seems great for us as writers. That's not always the case though, because you've got DevOps, you got engineering saying, hey, writers, you guys just do this and feed it into all of our software development platforms, and you should be fine. No, we're approaching it and prioritizing it from a different way. We want to spend our time writing content and not dealing with the tools, and that's where the CMS actually has the advantage. If you don't do this right, the CMS is there to make writers more productive. It's there to make writers automate a lot of things that they would normally manually have to do. It's there to allow them to focus on writing, making sure that content is accurate, that content is consistent with across the brand, that content is reusable, all the things that we want with our content. That takes focus, that takes time. And when you're messing around with technology, and when you're messing around with trying to figure out just how to check your content in or merge your content with another conflicting set of content, when the more time you spend on that, the less time you're not doing focused writing. Okay, so these 3 bullets on the right, I like these. These are copied straight from content as code. The tools should disappear. They should let authors use the tools to allow them to be most productive and happy, and then they should also allow a diversity of tools to be used in this workflow, right? So those are the things that if you put those together, that is actually the same goal. That is the same ambition of a CMS. The CMS is trying to do that same thing. The only difference here is content as code. We're sort of adopting a lot of software and engineering principles, and we got to put it all together ourselves to make our authors happy so that they can just focus on writing and make the tools disappear. That's a great ambition. We know that it's aspirational. We know that'll never happen, but we want to get it there. We want to move in that direction, get as close as we can. Okay, so next thing here, with that in mind, everything that we're doing from here on out, that I'm going to talk about from here on out, really is around that focused writing. That should be our mission when we're doing something like this as writers. Is let's focus on the writing. Let's set all this other garbage aside and deal with that. Let DevOps deal with that. Let content ops deal with that. We need to write. That's what we do. That's what we've got to focus on. So we've got to prioritize. Okay. So in order to do that, there are, I would say, 5 different major danger zones that if we're going to build our own infrastructure, we're going to have to be careful from. It could really sink us. Okay, repository design, our workflows, sharing content, dependency, link management, and just the sort of change management, the culture change. If you have writers that are maybe coming from not a software background, maybe great writers that are coming from manufacturing where they're not actually software shops. Those are going to be in for a culture shock, right? And we need to account for that. We need to recognize that and build some acknowledgement of that into our transition plan. So starting with, I'm going to go through these one by one, and I'll try to be quick here so that we save plenty of time for people to ask questions and kind of delve into any of these. So the first one is repo design. On the next slide here, Rick, if you could change. Okay, so our repositories with Git. Like I said, we've got some experience, talked to a lot of people. We've done quite a few, implementations now using Git, and the majority of the repo designs that we've seen be successful are multi-repo. That doesn't mean that a mono repo, one repo for all the content. That doesn't mean that can't work. We've seen some very smart people or very smart organizations with one repo, but generally speaking, the multi-repo design is going to not only going to give you more, I think, more flexibility, but it's also going to deliver on the promise of Git in general. Git is about dispersed, distributed management of content or code, and that happens in multiple repos. So you can take a lot of advantage of a lot of the Git goodies if you go multi-repo. But you do have some trade-offs. But what we're trying to do now, like I said, as an industry for folks who are moving in this direction, is try to scale this. So scaling with one repo is difficult for a lot of reasons. So as we scale, we think that multi-repos is going to be more scalable, more flexible, but also it's going to present some different challenges that a mono repo wouldn't present. So the designs of these repos, you see just how you can have multi-repo. As you can see, there's not in this particular sketch, there are not too many repos. There's not a repo for example, for every deliverable, right? There might be a repo for every product. There might be a repo for every language, but we have to balance out our need for scalability with the need to manage these repos and manage this content and manage the dependencies in between those. So the best designs that we're seeing that are most successful, they are designed based on the relationship between content, not necessarily relationship between business units or writers or organizations. The best designs are about content. When we approach this as a writer, that's how we ought to be thinking: is how is our content organized? And if those happen to be in separate repos, we can figure that out. But we need to be thinking in terms of content. Those are the successful ones that we've seen. Again, don't underthink this. This is one of those things that needs to be really thought through, really tested out. We recommend that you sketch out a couple different repo designs and a couple or three and test them out, road test them. See, that's the great thing about Git is you can spin this up, send a bunch of repos up real quick, run some content through it, do some role playing and say, hey, what were the here? Where are we going to get screwed? That's what the due diligence is all about. Okay, so that's one. Next thing, workflows. On the next slide here, you got to have people working in these repos, and really, we don't want to be spun around the axle on branches getting tangled up and merge conflict constantly. So we want simple workflows that do the job. And the workflows, this sounds very, very obvious, very sort of very simple, but I would say this and I would repeat it again and again: avoid merge conflicts. Merge conflicts are that thing that we're seeing that is sucking away the life out of a writer's day, out of an organization's release schedule in this type of environment. So if you can design to avoid merge conflicts, you're going to be on your way. The folks that we talk to, multi or single or single repo designs, they have this in common. We've designed everything that we do around avoiding merge conflicts. Okay, so that's one thing. Automate as much as you can. That could be automating some of your pull requests, review assignments, things like that. And if you're doing that, you're actually simplifying this for the author so that they can actually get back to writing. So you see a diagram here of the Git happy path. Like, it should be that simple when you're writing. Now, when you're doing reviews and when you're merging branches and things like that, it's more difficult than that. But we want the day-to-day writing function that writers are hired for, they're best at. We want them to be spending more time doing that and not merging branches and doing pull requests and dealing with conflicts. What we would recommend for something like that is to have a specialized role where that person is well versed in the underpinnings of Git and the underpinnings of your content and how to merge and your release your branch strategy and knows best how to make that all good and true on your live branch, on your master branch. So those are really, this is a really sticky sort of trap infested road to walk down, and you got to be careful with this. And but if you do this, that is, you can automate. What is in the CMS is, I guess you'd be calling that your check-in, check-out functionality, and your some of your versioning and your release management functionality. That's where this all happens in the Git environment, is in your workflows. Okay. Another thing to think about, another common sort of trap that people fall into, and some climb out of it and some don't, is on the next slide here, and that's common content. So most of the successful Git shops that we work with, and DITA shops, have their repos for common content, and some have multiples, right? But putting your common content aside and governing that in a different way, because it is shared content, is important. If you're in DITA, then you're probably in DITA and dealing with a lot of the overhead of the XML and all the different DITA mechanisms that take time to learn and take time to apply and they take time to process. You're probably dealing with that because you want to do reuse. Just a guess, right? So you really want to keep that intact, and you don't want to say, we're not reusing content because it's too hard to deal with in this environment. Well, then, may as well go back to Documentum if that's the case. That is not something that would, it is a negotiable, right? It's that's the word I'm looking for. It's non-negotiable. If you move to DITA, you need to reuse content. So how do we do that? How do we make that happen? So what I see a lot is that, remember what I said about picking your tools and getting a tool that does DITA heavy lifting. If you get a tool that can do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of context setting mechanisms, I think you should apply those. A lot of people leave those on the table. One example is Oxygen. If you're an Oxygen shop and you're not using Oxygen projects actually give you the context setting mechanisms through things like virtual folders, which you could put point to your common content through there, and then control linking through master files. There's a lot of value and a lot of a lot of good things that you can gain from really leaning on something like your Oxygen projects. You also can leverage your Git mechanisms for that. So those are the things that were brought up at the last webinar, and I'll be I'll be forthright about this. I still have some learning to do about submodules and subrepos. I see some people that are on the call right now that actually have more experience than I do, than we do with submodules and subrepos. That's why I was asking Rick if he maybe turn on the mic. But there are some ways that you can modularize your content for reuse in Git. So if you apply your tool set, what I'm saying is you're basically just getting the most out of the choices that you've made with your tooling, with Git and with Oxygen in this example. You can make that, you can make it happen. You can do reuse in this environment. It takes a good repo design and it takes good governance of that reusable content, but you can do it. And it just takes a little bit more than it does in a CMS, where all the links are already managed, and you can, some CMSs have a special label for reusable content, and it makes it easier, right? But this can still be successful if you put all these pieces together. Next thing here, so we're kind of connected with, we're kind of naturally dovetailing into this conversation on the next slide about dependencies. Okay, so this is a tough one. This is about link management. Rick, I think you can advance here. I'm not seeing the slide advance. There you go. Okay. So, and I think there's okay. So, when it comes to dependencies, this is one place where if you don't have a good strategy for this or the right tooling for this, you'll have people pulling repos and they'll open up a DITA map and it'll say, I can't find any of these things, right? These references and these topic refs, they're all broken. I don't see these resources. Okay, well that basically means that you've got, you're either missing some content, you're missing a repo, things have been moved and not updated. You've got a lot of different things that can go wrong. So I think this is where that content comes into play when it comes to the technology that they recommend. So content as code, I didn't get too much into this, and that's some reading for you guys if you're interested in it. But one of the things that they say is when it comes to the tooling is to lean on microservices as much as you can. So a microservice could be around link management and making sure that all your links are intact and identifying where they're broken. Elliot Kimber is also on that wavelength too, and recommends that you deploy for link management purposes something like base or exist that really is going to allow you to manage your links. I think you can do it with just real proper diligence and good practices around the way that you're using Oxygen and master files. Oxygen will track dependencies if they're identified as master files, and when you move stuff, Oxygen will tell you, hey, you're moving this, it's linked, it's got some dependencies, do you want me to update the dependencies? That has its limits, but I think it's a good first thing to put in place. And then if you add these microservices around, automated and scaled link management, I think you can win in this area. But that is a huge area of concern when it comes to the Git adopters. Okay, the last one here, and I'll okay, and there you see. Sorry, I knew there was a transition in there, Rick, but that's some of the example solutions around dependencies. So this last piece here, and this will sort of end my bit here, is just the culture fit. Okay, so in all of the things that we've seen and the talking that we've done to people with and worked with, one of the common factors is that in success that these shops have sort of acknowledged that Git is a cultural thing. It is a it is a thing that is pretty much, is pretty widely accepted and sort of a natural way of managing objects in software shops and in certain corporate cultures. But it's not like that everywhere. So, and your writers, are not are not necessarily always going to have that experience. You might have new writers. You may have people that are coming from a different industry. So prioritize the human aspect of this. In any pages, we say the same thing. If it's going from unstructured to structured, if it's going from desktop publishing to XML, you got to prioritize that people are the ones that need to make this happen. And those people are usually the writers that need to make this happen. So we've seen companies that really teach people first in a sort of I call it the Karate Kid way of actually teaching people first in command line. Forget about source tree, forget about Tortoise, forget about any sort of Oxygen Git connector. We're doing all of our stuff in Git to start, and we're going to learn about Git and how it works and how the coders are using it, and really just putting all this together before we put a GUI tool on top of that to make things easier, more visual, and more automated. So just sort of acknowledging that it is that important, and that the people understanding it is that important. That is one thing that is key in making this a success. And this is not something you have to do at the CMS. The CMS, you got to train people on DITA. The CMS is usually it's like a one-day training to know where all the buttons are and how the workflows are configured and all that. But that's a pretty straightforward thing when it comes to that change management of doing a CMS. You mostly have to teach them DITA. But it's way different when it comes to Git. You might have to teach people Git and get the true understanding of how it all works. The places where it doesn't work are basically when the writers are just told to figure it out. That typically doesn't work in any place, but it's really not going to work when you're asking people to treat content as code. So that's the sort of the last thing here. It doesn't have anything to do with technology, really. It just happens to do with prioritizing training and the human element here. As we like to say, most of these things fail not because of technology, but because of people. It's a people problem, not a technology problem. So people have got to move the technology around, and that's what we're trying to say here. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to, we'll wrap this up, Rick, on the next slide here. And I'll turn it over to you just to kind of bring us home.
Thank you, Frank. I think I agree. I think what this has shown is you can go either route, and there's definitely cases where Git will make sense, and I think there's definitely cases, I will still hold out for the CCMS vendors and say that there are still going to be cases out there where a CCMS makes more sense. But I think we're both agreed that whatever you do, when you're going down this route, you have to take your time. The scariest thing I ever see or hear is when I'm talking to people who are looking at moving to DITA, and they say, "Oh, we want to be up and running and get our first publication out inside 3 months." And these things take time. It takes time to choose the right solution. It takes time to learn how that solution works. So follow these guidelines. Do your due diligence. Do your testing on whatever system you're going. Pilot your system, and don't be afraid of bringing in third-party consultants, because the people that are out there, the people like Frank that have been doing this for lots and lots of companies, have a huge amount of experience that they can lend, and there's some really good people out in the market that will help you achieve your goals, whichever approach you take. So I'm going to let Frank say a little bit more about Refine, because he knows his company better than I do, other than I know that they're very good.
Yeah, and we're just what we are, as Rick said, we're some of the consultants in the industry that can help you do it faster, faster, better, and in the long run, it's higher value if we can do it faster and better, and we can save you some driving into the ditch. And we've got the experience that we can share, and more than anything, we don't have any secret sauce with most of what we do. can just give you the information that helps you go forward with confidence, that you made the decisions based on requirements, that you made the decisions based on data, and not just throwing something against the wall and seeing what sticks and going with whatever way the wind blows. So we can help with that, and we try to do it end to end and look at it in a holistic approach. So that's about us, and that's what we're sharing with you as we found all these things I've been mentioning through just doing consulting work. That's enough about us, Rick.
Yeah, that's enough about you. Now about me. So, just a little bit about Bluescreen. We have been out there for a long while. So XDocs is a well-established CCMS. We like open technologies as well. So we do use open standards wherever possible. And like everybody, we've got a wide list of customers. You don't need to know about that. Or you may wish to know about that. If you want more information about that, just contact me and we can take that offline. I think we move to, if anyone's got some questions that they want to type in, maybe the safest bet.
Yeah, I see one from Dan about 10 minutes ago. So I'll take this one, Rick. And
I'm glad about that.
Dan is, it's about Git, and I agree, Dan, so Dan says, Git works well for people who grok Git and understand the complexity of branching and merging and rolling back changes. True. How do you hide those complexities for a Git novice? It seems like you have to build a whole UI to do that. Yeah, I mean, that's the when it comes to the focused writing, that's the sort of challenge, the puzzle to put together. I do think that there does need to be some understanding of what Git takes. And so there needs to be that sort of, I like that whole Karate Kid approach. Like, you're going to have to do this in command line, and you have to do it, catch a fly with a pair of chopsticks before I let you go in the ring and fight a real human, right? And I like that approach of doing that command line so they understand like how this is all put together. What are the techniques? What are the moves? What are some of these basic commands? And how does this all work together? But then leveraging the tools from some UIs from the other side, simplifying it, putting Oxygen on top of it, and using Oxygen projects and the Oxygen Git connector, and really just through experience, sort of banking on people really grokking it at some point. Dan, that's all I can say is that that's the best approach. If you don't want to build the UI, there are some teams who built a UI on top of Git, and have allowed some drag and drop within and link management in that UI. Then you're building a CMS. So where do you stop with that, and where do you what's the business case for doing that? But the company that I'm talking about is one of the largest companies in the world, and I've seen it. They've built a UI on top of Git. But another way to say that is they built their own content management system. So that's the best I can do to answer that question. I hope that helps and gives you some ideas.
I think with any technology, if you introduce in people even just structure, it's a problem. That's why we have our simplified WEX for SMEs. You just have to hide as much as you can from people, and even if you're using Git, you just look at what you need to expose to people as a minimum, and do it slowly. But it's always going to be hard. Have we got any other questions? I don't think we've got any more, Frank. But if anyone does have any questions, what I will do, let me just go here, is please email either of us, both of us. We really do appreciate the time you've given to come along today, particularly after last week's frustrations. We were equally frustrated, I can assure you. but hopefully you found today's sessions useful, but do please continue to send in questions and we will continue to answer and do some other things. So thank you from myself and Bluestream. Over to you, Frank.
Yes, and from Refine side, thanks again to everybody. And like Rick said, feel free to reach out. I think some of you did that, just reached out on email last time with questions, and we're happy to do that. And Rick, I'm not going to volunteer for a third part of this yet.
No, not sure. I think we'll wait till we're all getting back together face to face, Frank, and maybe at an event.
Right. Yeah, it's still summer. It's still summer, and people are on holiday and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So we'll take a little break, but I think there's a lot of topics here to dive deeper into, and you could take any one of these things and do a detailed analysis of side by side. I think that might be interesting, but like I said, I'm not volunteering anything right now.
No,
but thanks again, everybody, for showing up, and like Rick said, thanks for hanging with us through the fall start of last week, and we'll look forward to keeping the conversation going, and that's really, I think, what we want to do. It is going to still be an issue after the summer and after the pandemic, and after this is the way that the industry is. These are some of the main options in the industry right now for doing content. So how do you make the best of either option? How do you make the right choice? Because I think we all do have a choice on what we can do. And we want the writing teams to be making the choice, not DevOps, not engineering, not IT. We want writers to be making the choice because they are the ones that have to make this all come to life. And so we'll continue the conversation so that people can make the right choice, make a good choice.
Yeah. And lastly, I will send the link. This has been recorded, so we'll put the recording up online and share that with everybody as well. And with that,
cool.
Goodbye.
All right. Ending's right on time. Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.